welcome for the same topic, the internal environment, and the next part, that is the intracellular and extracellular fluid. Here, I am Dr. Indira Patil, working at Shikshan Sanstha's Dada Patil Mahavidyalay, Karjat, Department of Zoology. This topic for MSc second, semester third, from paper first, animal physiology. From the internal environment, the intracellular and extracellular fluid is the first part of this topic, the intracellular environment. The intracellular environment, that is the intracellular fluid. Intracellular fluid. Thus here, in intracellular environment, mainly we study about the intracellular fluid and their solutes concentration in intracellular fluid. That is, we are talking about the intracellular environment here. Again, we refer this figure, that is, this figure mainly shows in any animal, or for example in human body, there is a presence of 40% of solids and 60% of the fluid. Out of that, how much is the intracellular? How much is the intracellular? As we talk about the intracellular fluid and their concentration, it is about again 60% of the total body cells from the intracellular fluid. And the cells, and inside the cell there is a fluid portion. Thus, if we consider all these cells and their fluid content, it is the intracellular fluid. But this intracellular fluid is always balanced according to the interstitial fluid, or it is always balanced according to the uh, plasma flowing through the blood vessel, as well as it is also balanced according to the cell function, to the particular uh, metabolic reactions or metabolic processes occur in that particular cell. Here, the intracellular fluid lies within the cells and is the principal component of the cytosol and cytoplasm. As we discussed in first part of internal environment, in introductory part of internal environment, you know that uh, the intracellular fluid is nothing but, or the fluid lies within the cell, or it is a principal component of the cytoplasm or the cytosol, principal component of cytoplasm of the cell. The intracellular fluid makes about 60% of the total water in the human body and in an average size of the adult male. If you consider the human body or human male, in case of that, 60% of the total body fluid is present in intracellular fluid. Okay, the 60% body fluid is there, and out of that 60% body fluid, there is a 60% is formed by means of, that is two-thirds is formed by means of intracellular fluid. The intracellular fluid accounts for about 25 liters, that is 7 gallons of fluid. It forms about 25 liters. 25 liters is equal to 7 gallons of the fluid. Okay. That is a total intracellular fluid is a 25 liters in case of human being. This fluid volume tends to be very stable. It is a very stable component of the all body cells, because the amount of water living amount of water in living cells is closely regulated. In all living cells, the amount of water is regulated according to the interstitial fluid and the plasma within the blood. Okay, thus it is a fluid within the cell, that is intracellular fluid. It is a very stable in human being as well as all animal body in all living cells. Okay, if the amount of water inside the cell falls to a value that is the too low, the cytosol becomes too concentrated with solutes. If it is a fall, water content from the cell, water content from the cell, if it is a leave from this cell, the water is lost from the cell, what will happen? it lead into a cell become more and more concentrated. That is, more salt concentration is comparatively salt concentration is comparatively high, that is as compared to the water content of the cell. That is, cell become more concentrated, cell become too concentrated. That is less as compared to the salt concentration, water level is low. Water level is low. It is called as a cell become too concentrated. If too much water enter in cell, in opposite case, if too much water enter in cell, what will happen? Cell becomes swell and swell. Cell is enlarged. Cell will be enlarged and cell may be brushed and destroyed and be destroyed and may be destroyed. Okay. The cell, if the water is lost from the cell, cell shrink or cell become too concentrated. And if the water enter inside the cell, cell may enlarge. Cell enlarge, that is cell swell, and it may be brushed and it may be destroyed. This type of experiment can be carried on the RBC. The RBCs, that is one of the one drop of blood is when mixed with hypertonic solution or hypertonic solution. This type of result we can observe that a cell can be um, shrink or cell can be brushed, or swell. Okay, this is about the intracellular fluid. Again, we refer this figure because this is important to explain the intracellular fluid, intracellular environment of the cell. Okay, now that is the exchange of water among the body fluid compartment is occur according to the ionic and salt concentration, and thus it is always remain stable. This solutes and water concentration in intracellular fluid, that is intracellular environment is maintained. Then the total concentration of solutes within the animal cell must be equal to the solute concentration of the extracellular fluid. Thus total concentration of solutes within the animal cell, it must be equal to the solute concentration in extracellular fluid, that is outside the cell. Solute concentration in outside the cell, that is a this is the intracellular environment and this is the extracellular environment. That is, solute concentration within the cell is must be equal to the solute concentration to outside the cell. This plant cell can higher internal osmotic concentration and hydrostatic pressure than the external medium. The plant cell always shows the internal higher osmotic concentration in case of plant cell, and it is hydrostatic pressure is it is also high, and internal osmotic concentration it is also high, but this is not the case in case of the animal cell. The energy must be continuously expanded to maintain this equilibrium of the solute concentration, and always there is utilization of the energy or expand of the energy to maintain this equilibrium between the extracellular environment and intracellular environment. That is the intracellular environment, that is the environment of the cell, normal functioning of the cell, normal metabolism of the cell, and normal product synthesis of the cell, growth of the cell. All these functions are maintained. Shape and size of the cell, it is also maintained uh, continuously, or it is maintained this equilibrium, um, and this is and due to that there is a energy must be continuously expanded. Energy is continuously expanded to maintain all these normal functioning of the body, maintenance of the intracellular fluid of the body, intracellular environment of the body, intracellular environment of the cell. Okay, all cells of the body. The constituents of internal environment vary in different animals. The constituents of internal environment is always vary in different animals. In different animals or even in case of different cell, these constituents in internal environment, that is their water level as well as their solute concentration all is uh, maintained, and it is a very cell to cell, that is cell to cell of the different tissue, as well as it is also vary in animal to animal. It is vary in animal to animal. The constituents of internal environment of the cell is vary in animal to animal. It is very cell to cell, and it is depending on the taxonomic position. That is, the different types of animals are there. That is vertebrates animals. Invertebrate again there are fish, amphibians, reptile, mammals. That is according to their, they live in different environmental condition. Fish lives in aquatic environment. Then lizards are terrestrial. Then snakes are, most of the snakes are terrestrial, man is terrestrial, birds are flying animals, and according to their environment, their body cells shows the different internal environment. Body cells shows the different, or their body having the different internal environment, as well as the cells showing their intracellular environment, and their solute concentration or their solute content and water content is vary from animal to animal. That is, it depend upon the taxonomy or in which type of animal, terrestrial, aquatic, or according to that their taxonomy is again. The nature of external environment, it also depend upon the external environment in which environment animal lives. It also depend upon the pattern of ionic and osmotic regulation of animal. It is also depend upon the pattern of their ionic and osmotic regulation of animal. That is, in paramecium it is different, in fish it is different, in other amphibians, in frog it is different. That is, it depend upon their ionic and osmotic regulation in according to the external environment, or in case of cell, it depend upon their extracellular environment. Okay, so here the again there is some um, other factor, that is, a total intracellular ionic content is fairly low and constant. Intracellular ionic content is always low. Ionic content is always low, and total positive charges or negative charges, that is ionic content, is fairly low than extracellular environment. The ionic environment of animal cell is always dominated by potassium rather than sodium. Their ionic environment is, that is, if there is a positive charge, is mainly due to the in internal environment of the cell, is mainly due to the potassium ions than the sodium ions. That is, sodium ions mainly maintain the ionic balance or positive charges in extracellular environment. The potassium is mainly maintain the positive charge of internal environment. That is mainly potassium, and then the sodium, then sodium, and thus generally low concentration. Uh, Thus, the ionic environment of animal is always dominated by potassium rather than sodium, and generally there is a low concentration of ionic content than the extracellular environment. Okay, the intracellular pH is always close to neutrality. The pH, intracellular pH is always close to neutral pH. It is always close to neutral pH, and according to that, there is a transfer of H plus ions from one side to another side of the cell through the plasma membrane. This is the plasma membrane, and there is a transfer of these positive ions, hydrogen ions, to maintain the neutral pH inside. Intracellular pH is a mainly neutral pH or near to neutrality. The basic pattern of high organic content, low ionic content, neutral pH is a consistent for protozoans and all animals. That is, what is the basic pattern of all types of cells, most of the cells. If you consider the protozoans or even all animal cells, this basic pattern is a high organic content. Organic content is always high inside the cell, and there is a low ionic content. This is also characteristics of the intracellular fluid, then our intracellular environment, then neutral pH. And thus, these are the characteristics of the intracellular environment or intracellular fluid, that is the high organic content, low ionic content, high organic content, and neutral pH. Okay, do you understand this? Thus, this is same for from fresh water to most of the advanced terrestrial animals, from fresh water, from marine water, as well as terrestrial and amphibian environment, amphibian animal cells in intracellular environment. Then, in case of terrestrial environment or some aerial animals, all types of animals, these characteristics are maintained. That is high organic content, low ionic content, and neutral pH. You understand this? That is the intracellular environment of the animals. That is during this last, with the help of these three slide, you learn the characteristics of the intracellular environment or intracellular fluid which is present inside the cell. Okay, thus uh, about the intracellular environment. Now we are going to study about the extracellular fluid. That is, after study of extracellular fluid, the next topic will be the extracellular environment. That is, we have to discuss more about the extracellular fluid. That is, here first introductory part of extracellular fluid. That is, in extracellular fluid account for the one third of the body's water content. One third of the one account for the other one third of the body's water content. Extracellular fluid for the other one third of the body water content, that is other than intracellular fluid, the remaining water content is nothing but it is about one third. That is intracellular fluid is a two third and extracellular fluid is a one third. That is other than intracellular fluid, one third body fluid is nothing but the extracellular fluid. Okay, as we discussed in earlier lecture. I have also explained this with the help of the same figure. Okay, the approximately 20% of the extracellular fluid found in plasma. Okay, 20% is found in plasma, and plasma travel through the blood in blood vessel and transport a range of material including blood cells, proteins, electrolytes, nutrients, gases, and waste. That is, before going to discuss about the interstitial fluid and other fluid, first we think about the plasma. That is, blood vessels. Blood vessels carries the blood, and that blood, or this is the plasma. This plasma fluid, plasma, that is within that blood vessel there is a presence of other cell, that is RBCs are there, WBCs are there. That is inside the RBC, inside the WBC, that fluid is nothing but the intracellular fluid. This is again part of intracellular fluid. This is part of that two-third fluid which is discussed in this first part of this lecture. That is plasma, only plasma forms the extracellular fluid. Okay, this is also part of extracellular fluid, but plasma forms the 20% of that extracellular fluid, and 80% is formed by means of the 80% is formed by means of the interstitial fluid. That is, before going to interstitial fluid, first you clear about the plasma. That is 20% is present in extracellular fluid is present in plasma. Plasma travel through the body in blood vessel. Plasma flow through the, or it travel through the blood vessel. Okay, and transport a range of material. What is the function of plasma? It transport the respiratory gases. It transport the food nutrients mainly. It includes the mainly, and their main components is the blood cells are there. Blood cells, RBC, WBC, and platelets are there, and thus it consists the different types of substances, that is proteins, then including the clotting factors and antibodies also. That is, these are mainly the proteins. Then electrolytes are there. Electrolytes, different types of sodium chlorides, like electrolytes are there. Nutrients are there. That is a digested food material mainly. That is a glucose, as well as amino acids, as well as fatty acid and glycerol. These are the nutrients, as well as vitamins. These are the nutrients. These are also travel along with the plasma. There is a respiratory gases, oxygen, mainly carbon dioxide, travel with this along with this blood plasma. Then waste, uh, different types of waste released by the cell. That is a nitrogenous waste, as well as even carbon dioxide is a toxic substance released by the cell, finally entering blood. And blood transport this from cell level to lung level. It goes to cell level to lung level. Thus, from lung level to cell level, it is again these substances are transport. In this way, um, there is a transport of these substances along with the plasma. Thus, the body has other water-based extracellular fluid, and this includes the cerebrospinal fluid that bathes the brain, spinal cord, lymph, synovial fluid in joints, the pleural fluid in pleural cavities, the pericardial fluid in cardiac sac, the peritoneal fluid in peritoneal cavity, the aqueous humor of the eye. Thus, these are the different fluid in addition to blood and interstitial fluid. That is, which are these fluid? That is, these are considered as a 2%. That is, lymph and other fluid are considered as a 2% of the total body fluid. 2% of the total body fluid. And thus here, it in body has this extra water-based extracellular fluid. These are cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid in present in brain and spinal cord. The lymph present in lymphatic vessel and lymph nodes. The synovial fluid present in joints of bones. Then pleural fluid is present in pleural cavity. Pleural cavity, that is the cavities of the lungs. Cavities surround the lungs. Thus here pleural cavity, there is a pleural fluid is present. Okay. The pericardial fluid around the heart. That is, around the heart there is a presence of pericardial cavity and it is filled with a fluid called as a pericardial fluid. That is a it is a pericardial fluid. The peritoneal fluid around the peritoneal cavity present around the different visceral organs of the body. That is digestive system, reproductive systems, and other kidney and other parts of the other visceral organs of the body, viscera of the body. There is a peritoneal fluid. That is, all organs are lined by means of the pleural fluid, pericardial or peritoneal fluid, as well as membrane, different membrane, peritoneal membrane, and this membrane enclose a cavity, and these are these different cavities and filled with a fluid, thus and commonly called as a peritoneal fluid. And the aqueous humor of the eye, the fluid of the eye is the aqueous humor, and this aqueous humor is also a part of extracellular fluid. Because these fluids are outside the cell, and these fluids are also considered the components of extracellular fluid compartments. Thus, these fluids outside the cell, all these fluids are outside the body cells, outside the major body cells, and these are the spaces outside the body cells or tissues, outside the tissues, different types of tissues, and they are considered as these fluids are considered the components of extracellular fluid compartments. Thus, they are the extracellular fluid, or they are nothing but the part of extracellular environment. Okay. The gases, nutrients, waste material travel between the capillaries and the cell through the through the gases, nutrients, and waste material travel between the capillaries and the cell through the interstitial fluid. The interstitial fluid is nothing but the one of the fluid in between the cell and the blood capillaries. In between the cell and blood capillaries, as well as in between the cell and in between the different cells, in between the cell and all these compartments, there is a one more or major compartments is nothing but the 80% of the extracellular fluid is present in interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid. The cells are separated from uh, the interstitial fluid by selectively permeable cell membrane. Thus, from interstitial fluid, cells are separated by means of the semi-permeable membrane, that is their plasma membrane. And thus, that helps to regulate the passage of material between the intracellular fluid and interior of the cell. Interior of the cell and extracellular interstitial fluid, there is a cell membrane, there is a permeable or semi-permeable membrane, and it is the permeable membrane helps to regulate the passage of material between these two, that is interstitial fluid and the intracellular fluid and interstitial fluid, IF. Hmm. IF is the intracellular fluid. That is, there are three types of fluid mainly. Here consider 20% by formed by means of the plasma, 80% is most of the 80% is formed by means of the interstitial fluid, IF, and very small amount is formed by means of these small spaces. Okay, uh, that is mainly the pericardial and peritoneal fluid, as well as pleural fluid and cerebrospinal fluid and lymph. Okay, that is these spaces, small amount, and most of the 80% intracellular fluid and 20% by the plasma, isn't it? That is extracellular fluid. Here, with the help of this figure, you can understand the extracellular fluid. That is in between these, you can see these are, suppose these are the cells, and this is nothing but the lymphatic vessels, and this is the blood vessel. In blood vessel, there are presence of RBCs, RBCs, as well as WBCs and other, that is white blood cells. White blood cells are there, red blood cells are there, blood platelets are there. Okay, and there are some antigen, antibodies, and other proteins are present within the blood vessel. But there is a barrier, that is, this is the wall of blood vessels, and the substances diffuse into the from blood to interstitial fluid, that is nutrients diffuse, oxygen diffuse, fluid from the blood, it is also diffuse, as well as waste is taken inside, carbon dioxide is taken inside, that is from the cell. These are the patches we are observed. These are nothing but the cell. From this cell, diffusion of the waste, diffusion of carbon dioxide, and from the blood, diffusion of the fluid, diffusion of oxygen, diffusion of nutrients to the cell. The cell take all these substances, and these cells again gives the large proteins and nutrients in lymphatic fluid. These can be again from interstitial fluid. These are diffused into the lymphatic vessels. Thus here, presence of antigens, antibodies, there are white blood cells again in lymphatic vessels, and in lymphatic vessels there are no RBCs. What is the difference between this lymph and the blood? There are no RBCs mainly, and all these food substances and WBCs are also there, because lymphatic system is mainly it is a defensive system of the body, and it carries the WBCs. It carries the W. Thus WBCs are present in interstitial fluid also. WBCs are also present in lymphatic vessels are there, and thus there are presence of white blood cells in lymphatic system. But lymphatic system not having a proper shape like the blood vessels. It having their irregular shapes, and it also shows the sinuses. Hmm. Thus lymphatic vessels are there. These are called as lymphatic vessels. thus enclose the lymphatic fluid. Thus lymphatic fluid, it is also part of other body fluids of extracellular fluid. Thus extracellular fluid in biology, the body fluid that is not contained in cell. In short, the body fluid which is not present in cell, body fluid which is not present in cell, it is present in lymphatic vessel, it is freely present in interstitial fluid, and it is present in blood blood plasma mainly, interstitial fluid, and of the lymphatic vessel mainly. And it is a thus fluid which is not present in cell. In short, in biology it is called as a fluid that is not contained in cell. It is found in blood, in lymph, in body cavities lined with serous membrane. It is also present in body cavity lined with a serous membrane, that is a pleural cavity, pericardial cavity, and peritoneal cavity. This body fluid present in these cavities lined with this serous membrane in the cavities. Thus, channels of the brain, this fluid, extracellular fluid, also present in channels of the brain. It is also present in spinal cord. Okay. Thus, and in the muscular and other body tissues. This extracellular fluid is present in muscular tissue and other body tissues in the form of interstitial fluid. It is a differs from intracellular fluid. It is differ. There are differences, main differences between the intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid. These are nothing but the fluid within the cell. Intracellular fluid is a fluid within the cell. Extracellular fluid is a fluid outside the cell, which is not in cell, and thus in that it generally has high concentration of sodium. That is, in extracellular fluid, there is a high concentration of sodium and low concentration of potassium. That is opposite to intracellular fluid. As we discussed in intracellular environment, remember this point. That is it is opposite the case. That is large high concentration of sodium in in extracellular fluid, and low concentration of potassium is there. While intracellular fluid is a high in potassium and low in sodium. The fluid is often secreted by cells, and that fluid is secreted by the cell itself. That is extracellular environment of the cell, extracellular fluid outside the cell is secreted by the cell and cells to provide a constant external environment to the cell. The external environment is required to the cell, that is extracellular environment of the cell is having a fluid. That fluid is secreted by the cell. That is, it is a release from intracellular environment for cellular operation, for normal functioning of the cell, and always their maintenance of the solute and water content of extracellular fluid uh, and intracellular fluid. This is about the extracellular fluid and intracellular fluid. At the same time, we also discuss the intracellular environment also. During the next lecture, we will discuss about the extracellular environment of the cell. Thus here, these are the links used to images to obtain the images for this video lecture, and this video is mainly for the educational purpose, no copyright infringement, and this copy belongs to the rightful owner. Thank you very much.